Welcome to the HMO Property Show, by investors for investors. Brought to you by the HMO Property Co, Australia's leaders in impact investing. Investments made with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside a positive financial return. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, as always, Mr. Neil Gibb, and today I've got Mr. Iain Shields from Homehub with me. Iain, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mate, Homehub is a marketplace, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And there's many other strings to your bow as well, isn't it? Not just Homehub.
Yeah.
I remember when we caught up, probably back in 2016, I reckon it was.
Yeah.
I was just blown away by your sort of knowledge in this space because, and I'll let you explain where you've come from and how you've ended up doing what you're doing in a second, but I remember sitting there and I left the meeting, I was like, wow, there's so much I don't know about this space that, you know, this man could in capacity and, you know, hopefully we can do some work together, mate, because I think it's looking like we probably can sooner or later, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, really, I think some of the stuff that I probably bring to the table is largely around the not-for-profit charitable sectors. Yeah. Both in the UK and here, and I was blown away by some of the stuff that you know, but also some of the stuff that you do as well is just phenomenal. So I think there's good opportunities to work together, and good motivations that align as well.
Yeah, and you've obviously got a nice Pommy accent there as well.
I do. I'm originally from Luton, and we just, from a footballing perspective, just got back into the Premier League. So yeah, I'm preparing myself for some late nights and some live football at 2:00 in the morning.
Jealous.
Yeah. And I've been here for about 7-8 years now, and just love living in Perth. And
great place, isn't it?
Oh, it's
such
phenomenal.
A great place.
Yeah.
What were you doing back in the UK?
So back in the UK, after university, I bobbed around in a couple of jobs, as you do, and then I fell into social housing as a housing officer. That was my first ever job in housing. I was a housing officer. I think I had about 800 properties in my patch, spread across the home counties, so Beds, Bucks and Herts, and a little bit in northern London. And it was great. Part of that role was also a antisocial behaviour lead specialism as well. So for people in Australia who might not know what that really means, that's kind of everything from safeguarding vulnerable adults and protecting children, to domestic violence, crime, serious crime, and also just your everyday, you know, noise complaints, parking issues, breaches of tenancy. So managing those things across a team of 16 in the housing department and helping people as the lead on those things. That was really what I was doing. And I just fell in love as soon as I started working in social housing. I just fell in love with the role. And I think there was a real connection to, I grew up on a social housing estate, and I just felt like I was just connecting with all the people that I grew up in my street, that mum would chuck us in their house while she went and got the milk, or you playing out on the street with kids that were 6-7 years older than you, and suddenly I'm helping people maintain housing and live in that type of housing.
Community building as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's how I saw it, actually. I remember one of the people that used to work with me said to me, you know, you're a housing officer, you're not a social worker. But I did quite often feel like I wanted to contribute a bit more than just the tick and flick of housing management. There was a much more person-centred approach in the way that I always went about things. I really cared about the people, and the job was me being paid to care about people in their homes and maintain that environment for them as well. So yeah, I loved it, absolutely loved it, and that really ignited a passion for me in housing. I worked a little bit in local government before I came out. So I worked at a local government, managing the community safety partnership aspects of a local government, which really entailed housing, but also fire, police. And it was from a high level perspective around, you know, the strategy of how do we make sure that we live in as not just as safe a place as we can, but also a thriving place. How do you make sure that a local government area is a place where people feel not just safe but connected? They feel like they belong. They feel there's access to opportunities from an economic perspective, but also from a social and welfare perspective as well. So I really loved that. And then I came out to Australia and fell into housing out here as well.
What was the pull to come out here?
I'd love to say the weather had nothing to do with it, Neil, but I just think generally there was just opportunity elsewhere. Yeah. The UK is an amazing place, and I'm privileged to come from the UK. At the same time, Luton was voted along with Hull, one of the worst places to live in the UK for 10 years in a row by the main tabloids newspapers. And we just felt like, me and my now wife felt like there were maybe other places that we could explore and travel. And if we came across places that we would want to settle down, we would settle down. So we left thinking we may settle down in Australia, highly likely to. And then when we did get here, we realised that the culture here, for us to settle down and raise kids and do those things if we wanted to do it, was going to be far better here than back home. Although we weren't, from a football team perspective, we weren't in the Premier League then. So,
and you've since settled down and had kids as well.
We have, yeah, we have, yeah. We've got a 7-month-old little boy called Teddy. Yeah, so. Wow, that's a challenge.
You move a very similar journey.
Yeah, I know.
So Iain came in the office prior to us going back to the UK on holiday, and you and Joe were supposed to have a meeting about housing, but I think you just spoke about kids for 45 minutes, didn't you? Yeah,
I think it was about 2 hours of just showing baby photos, roughly same ages, rhyming names, Teddy, Freddie. It's it was great to connect with Joe and just talk about kids. You talk about work, but never really got around to it. So, and it's just an interesting journey, isn't it? I think you'll find the same thing. You have your experiences, and then you think, I'm going to travel, I'm going to migrate, and you end up moving here, and all of that is a bit of a journey. But when kids come along, the journey begins. It's a real roller coaster. Yeah.
So when did you first come to Perth, or did you go over east first and then end up in Perth?
No, we came to Perth first. We actually arrived with about $1,500 in our bank account. And some cut up clothes that we bought in Bangkok that we just dossed around in the southern Thai islands before we came here for about 2 months. That was the end of our travels, and we thought, $1,500,
So about
in terms
a week.
We were like £1,500 in the UK will last quite a bit, but $1,500. We obviously hadn't done our research on how the cost of living is different. Yeah. So when we got here, we stayed with some family for a couple of months. Then we got our own rental. But I got offered a job fairly quickly in housing management, which was quite lucky. Our plan was actually just to travel around Australia in a camper van and do the working thing. But I got a job, and then I started going to different states and territories as part of that job. My wife then got a job, and she started going to different places as well. So we managed to jump on the plane with each other and get to Sydney. And it was pretty good. And we just always felt like Perth was just an amazing place. But just broader than that, WA was just incredible. It's got everything you need. I'm a real ocean lover, so I'm pretty always bowled over by the ocean, and it's just on your doorstep. Yeah. You've got Margaret River, Albany, you go north and you've got Exmouth and Broome, and you just go in land and you've got desert, and you've got culture and heritage, and it's phenomenal. It's a place where you can learn, it's a place where you can grow, and then you bring your kids up here as well. So
coming from the UK, it's not a massive change, is it? It feels very similar, apart from the weather's better.
Yeah.
It feels very similar, so it's very easy to settle in a place like this.
I think so, yeah. There's definitely some home comforts in terms of people. I remember when I first moved here, I love my wife, but I'd spent 7-8 months travelling with her, and spent every day with her. And when you get to Australia, it's dying for a bit of time away. So I started playing football, indoor football, five-a-side, just to meet some people. And the two lads that were running that, one was a Geordie and one was a guy from Luton, and just lived around the corner from us and knew the rugby club. And so you instantly start making connections and enjoying life. And so it's easy to settle in. People are so friendly here, and a lot of people that have migrated, they know what it's like and they want to help you settle in. So I think from that perspective, it's amazing. And I don't know about yourself, Neil. I mean, you just come back from holiday, but whenever I fly back into Perth, particularly in the summer, and you fly over the Derbyl Yerrigan and you got the sunset, and it just feels great, doesn't it?
Back home.
Yeah.
This is home now for me.
Absolutely.
This is home now for me. In regards to work and the work that we're doing back in the UK and the work that you're doing here now, do you see any similarities with the way that housing is there compared to here? Is there anything that they should do there that we are doing here, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think from a systemic perspective, the issues are still the same. I think the level of wealth and inequity in society remains across much of the first and second world countries. And so I think there's still homelessness. I think there's still affordable housing crises going on in both those areas, in both those countries. I think from a systemic perspective, there's things that we can learn from the UK that we should avoid here. It's far more progressive in the UK in the sense of the population size is bigger, and so the size of the social housing system is bigger. So everything feels more progressive. Everything feels more structured. There's more informed, evidence-based policy and systems and processes.
69 million people live in the UK. It's like a fraction of the size of Australia.
Absolutely.
And it's got much more history as well, which is probably why it's got the structure, the process and all that built into it as well.
Absolutely. With that though, Neil, is interesting because it, like, sometimes there's things that stymies. It doesn't create innovation. It doesn't allow for opportunity for change on a scale that you would want it to. So WA has that going for it. And at the same time, there's also things that we can learn from the system there, where perhaps it's not so positive in terms of there's been a lot of question marks around affordable housing and how some of the housing associations there sometimes do things like the rent to buy and the shared equity schemes, and how the CEOs are making a lot of money. Those organisations tend to be very commercially driven organisations, even though they're charities, and perhaps the outcomes and the impact isn't put first above maybe what the system and is allowing people to kind of do. So there's things that we could learn and put good governance in place around. Let's do things slightly different. Let's make sure that there's opportunities to do innovation, and do innovation that's evidence-based, that's well-informed, that's co-designed. But let's also make sure that we put good governance in place around that, so that it's a very agile system, but that we can make sure that the impact and the outcomes is put first, and then the commercial profit is second.
Do you feel like we've got that in Western Australia, or do you think we're heading towards that?
I feel like we are, in terms of affordable housing, Neil, I feel like we are nowhere near it. So one of the things that I wanted to do with Homehub was set something up that really helped us start to think about the need for an affordable housing market. I think the market's there, but we don't have a marketplace, and that's really what Homehub is meant to be. The challenge we have is that we have this complicated housing continuum that people have a very little knowledge around housing, generally anyway, that, you know, in terms of the whole ecosystem, but they also struggle because there's a lack of knowledge around what housing exists, how that fits into a bigger, broader ecosystem. There's also this need for housing literacy as well, across all people and all stakeholders. The challenge, I think, is that there's lots of people that need affordable housing in WA. I think it's a crisis that's getting far out of control now, and it's one of the main triggers for the increase in levels of homelessness, despite the great work and the increased funding from the state government, Commonwealth government, but people on the ground that are doing a phenomenal job, they still need more funding to do more things. But the early intervention and prevention stuff isn't there to avoid homelessness, to reduce and prevent homelessness. And Homehub's really there to try and do that by making it more apparent, by having a presence and saying there is a need for affordable housing. We know that there's lots of people that need it, and we've been connecting with those people for a while now, but the key issue is that there's not enough services and solutions to those. And so when I connected with you, that was one of my really exciting moments actually in doing Homehub, because whilst we know that there's people that need affordable housing and we need to know more about them, the main challenge is how do we stimulate solutions that actually help people? And there's not just one solution, or there's not just one organisation. The marketplace that we're aiming to try and promote to become a household brand in time, it relies on there being supply. Yeah. And so it's not just the bricks and the mortar, but it's the rent to buy products and services. It's the NRAS Mark II programs, and they maybe are government involved, but they're not government led. And so actually, I think there's opportunities there for us to say, yes, we know there's a crisis. Yes, we know there's hundreds of thousands of people in WA alone that need affordable housing, but actually we don't know who they are and we don't know what they look like. So we can't really design really great services and solutions to put in this marketplace to help people move into housing.
Yeah. What are we classing as affordable housing? Are we talking specifically about social housing that the government provide? Is affordable housing something that the private rental market can provide? A bit of both?
Real mixture. Yeah, it's a real mixture. If you can imagine, you've got homelessness on the left and social housing just above that. And then on the right-hand side of a scale, on the other side of the seesaw, you've got home ownership. And so the seesaw is going up and down. There's a need in both. There's supply issues in both. But actually what Homehub tries to be is the bit in the middle that helps the seesaw balance out, because otherwise you've got people that have to fall into social housing, they're not eligible, so they become homeless. We're seeing huge amounts of people who are falling out of that real estate rental market, but also the home ownership market, because of the interest rates and the cost of building. People are actually becoming homeless for the first time, or the risk of homelessness for the first time. But we also know that at times people who move into social housing, there's a stigma around social housing. I'm one of those people. I'm not on the dole. I'm not street homeless. People are able to climb out of social housing. It's a really valuable product. It's critical as a social and welfare service as much as a hospital is for when you break your leg. If families can't afford their own home, they need solid foundational housing for their children to grow up and to go and buy their own housing. So I'm a living, breathing product of that. The challenge that we've got is that people who are in social housing are income assessed, and so they're not able to climb out of social housing, and so actually sometimes they're stymied by their level of income, and the choices they make are, I can't go for that promotion because I may be over income and I might get kicked out of my social housing property, but where do I go to find affordable housing? And so the need for us is to catch people as they fall out of that real estate industry and find products and services like yourself who help people in those situations. But also, how do we take people from low to moderate incomes who want to increase their income, want to own their own house, want to own part of their own house, want to live with someone while they save for a deposit? There's the need for the marketplace to capture those varied people who have different needs.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, we're talking about rentals and products for people to buy and live in themselves, but at the affordable end of the scheme. And what's defined as affordable, Ian? Do we have a price point that's affordable, or is that continuously changing in regards to where the market is and where interest rates, construction prices, rental returns for investors? So many things you can sort of talk about there, isn't it, when it comes to affordable?
It's really interesting. And when I started Homehub, I had my own perceptions around this challenged a little bit as well in terms of how we would implement it in reality. So from a conceptual perspective, a definition internationally used for affordable housing is housing is affordable as long as it's no more than 30% of your household income on housing costs. And so that's really what people use. It's deemed that in wherever you are, whatever country you're in, you're likely to need at least 70% of your income to pay for education, health, transport, get to and from school, get to and from work, pharmaceuticals, all those other things. If you're spending more than 30% of your household income on rent or mortgage and other costs, then actually you probably can't eat you can't eat 3 meals a day. You're eating 2 or 1. You can't get to where you need to go on the train, whether it be work or to a health appointment, and you definitely can't afford good healthcare, insurances. Car insurances are going up in WA at the moment, which they have to. Can people afford to live if their housing costs are more? And housing is one of those fundamental, foundational components for anyone to live a good life. Forget about the sense of purpose and belonging,
need, isn't it?
You can't access services, you can't go to work, you can't live if you don't have long-term, safe, affordable housing. So that's really what people think of housing. And I actually had my perception of what we were going to try and do before we started doing it really challenged. And I think this is where it becomes really difficult around that housing system in the UK and housing system here, and how we have the opportunity to be really innovative and creative and not define eligibility criteria too much. We might say you can't move into a house because it's over 30% of your household income. But I met with a partner at Deloitte whose brother had a disability, and he challenged me on what is affordable? How are you going to do that? And I said, well, we would only match people to housing automatically where the property was less than 30% of their household income. And he said, well, that's rubbish because I could pay $50 of his rent a week, and I'm already doing that in private rental. So who are you to decide what's affordable for someone? Yeah. And so one of the biggest things that I think the UK has that we could take is choice and control for people and investors and the market. But the knowledge around, well, if you have choice and control, how do you make sure that you're making informed choices? How do you make sure that you use that control to try to make informed decisions to better your life, and that you're not going to get yourself into bother?
Yeah. It's interesting because as you're explaining that there, I was thinking about the kind of the median house price and then the median wage in Western Australia, which is probably the highest in the country from last time I looked into the statistics. Median house price is the lowest in the country. compared to Northern Territory, I think. Apart from Northern Territory, but with the rest of the states, we've got the lowest median house price, the highest wages in the country. So technically we should be classed as semi-affordable. But that's fine from the mid to high earners. And even some of the mid to high earners can end up in unaffordable accommodation based on their income, based on the calculation of 30%.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about affordable housing, we're really talking about the low to mid-income earners, because they're the ones that are affected the most when you're only earning a certain wage, and then your housing takes up 50, 60, 70% of your income, which is kind of where we're seeing that at the minute, aren't we? With if you can't get access to social housing, the next step up, if you take the HMO out of the sort of radar, the next step in between social housing and the private rental market is a big jump in what you're earning in your wages.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And there's not enough solutions. So there's not enough affordable housing products or services. I think you're right in the sense that affordable rental housing is largely going to be there for people on low to moderate incomes. That's where it will largely apply. But even those people might want the same as what the majority of people on the moderate to high income households might want. And bearing in mind, this is in the context of people's finance, because some people might earn a huge amount, but you might also want to go out and splash on a Ferrari spend it all on in nightclubs. So yeah, we can see that sometimes the household income doesn't equate to the level of wealth and the level of equity that people can use in the housing system, a housing ecosystem. And so that's why I think we need a real range of affordable housing products and services on the marketplace, because like you say, without the HMOs, people who are on the low to moderate income households who are single, they want to save for a deposit, but they can't move into those kind of places. They're not able to save. And the people on the moderate to high income who want to continue to live a bit of more of a lavish lifestyle, the expenses are slightly higher than maybe the 30% housing costs could allow for. Maybe they want to then move into a place and only pay 20% of their income, household income, on housing costs, because they like spending the other 80% how they want to spend it. And that's, I think, for young people in particular, they're starting to view housing in a very different way to the generation before them, where you move in somewhere at 21, you buy your house, and look, there was benefits of that. Housing for a long time was seen as bricks and mortar that you invest in, you make money, you commercialise, you get out. Great for a generation or two before us. But the reality is now, particularly over on the eastern states, but even here, the level of wealth generation in housing investment, it's not there now for young people. And so young people are looking at, particularly Perth, we're a very transient state. Do I really want to buy a house in a suburb in Perth and be here for the next 20 years? And do I want to play the housing market? Or can I move into HMO? Can I then move into a rent to buy, which doesn't really exist in WA en masse yet? Can I move into a shared equity scheme? Can I move into different housing rental products that allow me the ability to chop and change where I live based on, I get offered a job in Broome or I get offered a job in Sydney? Or are we all trying to still do things how we used to do things 20 years ago? So I think there's a real generational shift in housing.
It's happening.
Slowly,
but it's happening.
Yeah, and I think for young people, housing was probably from the last survey I saw at Yakwa, housing was one of the most, if not the top priority for them. It feels unobtainable to them, and so they are looking for affordable rental and affordable home ownership solutions.
So when you say that the generational shift is happening, and 20 years ago, 20-year-olds were buying 4x2s on 700 square metres, big back garden. It was the kind of dream, wasn't it? The Australian dream. And it's changing now. What are you seeing there? How are you seeing that shift, and what are you seeing in the change and what people are wanting to live in? Yeah,
so affordability is the driver for this.
And people will sacrifice what they live in to be affordable.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I also think that there's a bit of a consciousness shift as well. People want to see more impact. They want to feel like they're affecting their local community and even the global community. Like the climate change is becoming quite a big thing. The urban sprawl, the level of canopy shading that we need. Those kind of things are becoming really important to younger people, as well as sacrificing what they choose to live in, because it's better for the planet, it's better for their local community, and it's more affordable. And it also gives me the level of mobility to move around and do different things. So the nature of our housing products and services are going to have to change.
They're very conscious about environmental and sustainability outcomes, aren't they, these younger generation? All I bothered about was what pub I was going to on weekends.
I know, me too, which is actually giving me ulcers in my old age. But yeah, no, they are very conscious of it. And I think it's something that politicians maybe, it's not that they're ignoring on a local, state or Commonwealth level, but I think it's something that's going to creep up very, very quickly. I don't think that from a political perspective, if I look at the levels of funding in homelessness, it's not enough, nowhere near enough. The services are really underfunded, and the people that are out there doing the jobs of those homelessness outreach workers, and very tricky jobs, and I've done that kind of work. They're not paid enough because the organisations that they work for aren't funded well enough, so they need more money. There's a massive undersupply of social housing. The social housing income limit policy maybe hasn't been increased over time as much.
And they're offloading social housing as well at the minute. I heard the government are actually selling social houses.
Yeah, so they had a commercial arm that they used to try and drive affordable housing, which was then used, like the profits were then used to reinvest in social housing. The minister at the moment is trying to do his best in terms of increase the housing supply.
Social or affordable.
Social housing supply.
Yeah.
The focus isn't at the moment on affordable, because on that housing continuum, the minister's seeing as the Minister for Housing and Homelessness for the first time, which is it's an amazing shift. But it's really focused on that pointy end, and the early intervention prevention stuff isn't happening, and the lack of affordable housing.
So there's a massive
investment.
There's a massive opportunity for investment then to fill that space.
Huge.
Isn't there? Yeah.
And when we say investment, I mean investment from a state government perspective, a local government perspective. Time, policy, effort, co-design, encouraging investors, like financial investors, domestically and internationally, to come and build more housing, come and develop more urban dense apartment blocks that can be used by younger people and leverage the HMO model to create affordable rental housing. That returns a huge rate of investment for financial investors, but there needs to be some investment in people locally as well, and not just from a financial perspective, in lots of different ways. And I also think there needs to be, a lot of people talk about innovation in housing, and it's probably just something that spills over from a different government department. Health talks about housing, health talks about innovation, or the business, tourism and business talks about innovation. So we go, Department of Communities, we're really innovative. Well, I'd like to see where we're really innovative, because the rate of homelessness has gone up. The rate of social housing need has gone up. There is no affordable housing marketplace beside the Commonwealth NRAS system. If you go on the Housing Pathways website for the state government at the moment, it just says we're not using affordable housing for any other purpose but to sell and use for social housing at the moment. So there is no affordable housing products for people in WA. And when I look at the numbers, 9,000 people each night are homeless in WA. Big number.
And
ridiculous.
These aren't necessarily people sleeping on the streets. These are sleeping in the cars, sleeping on people's sofas.
Yes.
People with no fixed abode, essentially.
Yeah. And that number is hugely underreported as well. It's inaccurate. Yeah. That's just from the homelessness sector that reports from. Homelessness has the Homehub has people registering with us who are families living on the beach in Margaret River, who are telling their children that they're on a long holiday and actually they're homeless on the beach while they find another affordable rental house. Now they're working, they're good people, they've sustained tenancies, they don't need social and welfare service provision, but they're symptomatic of the people that we're seeing, in the sense of they're not at the pointy end of the homelessness and social housing system need. They're actually everyday people that just need a hand up into affordable housing, but there isn't any affordable housing products and services.
They're stuck in that gap, aren't they, that we're talking about?
Yeah, and that number of people is estimated just before COVID. It was estimated around about 200,000 people in WA alone were living in housing stress and or poverty. And poverty means homelessness. It's the worst symptom of housing stress. But they're people who are the 9,000 who are homeless and underreported. There's 16,000 on the social housing wait list at that time. So you're talking, that accounts for 25,000. So the other 175,000 we don't know about. They're people in the private rental market that are paying over 30% of their income on unaffordable housing. They're people that are living on their friends' sofas while they're in between things. They're people that are in Sydney that want to move back here. They're having to do FIFO, but they can't find an affordable rental. They're the young person looking to move out of home with a disability they don't want to apply for NDIS, but they do need access to an affordable housing property, and they're single and they can't afford the rental property markets at the moment. They can't buy their own house. So rent to buy would be amazing for them. So we're seeing huge amounts of those people. When I look at the numbers, 25,000 out of the 200,000, 175,000 people, if we don't put the seesaw in a state of balance, we're going to continually just see people ship, and it only takes something like a COVID, and then housing has become 10 times harder for a lot of people. And I think there's the majority of people out there in WA that would know at least one person who is struggling, even if they don't openly admit it. You probably sense someone in the office, sense someone, see people on the train, dropping kids off at the school run. It might be a friend, might be a family member, might be someone down at the community sport club at the weekend. And you probably know that they're having 1 or 2 meals a day because they can't afford their housing. They're at risk of default in their mortgage. They are looking for another rental, and they're scrambling around because they've got 3 weeks' notice to do it. And we're all aware of at least one person in that situation at the moment.
Yeah, well, our phone is ringing in the office quite regularly. We have had to switch it on silent because it just rings so much at the minute. So obviously we can only help so many people. You spoke about the family down on the beach there at Margaret River. Unfortunately, they're not the type of people we can help because the HMO is designed for singles or couples that need access to housing. Yeah. What we can do with our model is free up some of the houses. And I think in the last ABS stats, 25 to 30% of households are single-person households all across Australia. It's like 25%. So let's free up some of that 25% by putting the single people into HMOs, which then frees up some of the other housing for families so they don't have to sleep in tents and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Again, that comes back to that level of housing mobility. People want that level of housing mobility to be free to move around and do things where it meets their needs. You get offered a job in Margaret River, you should be able to go. You get offered a job, or your house rental comes to an end in Margaret River, you should be able to move around. But there's not the level of solutions from a affordable housing marketplace perspective to allow people to move out freely and take risks. The risks are so high at the moment, and it's one of the things that's really stymieing progress. I wouldn't, at the moment, think too many people are really keen on just whacking their house on the market because there's no private rentals to move into. So your house sells where you go.
It's stagnant at the minute.
It's rubbish.
I think we've got less than 3,000 houses. Like when we talk about land and apartments, there's more. I think there's like 6,500, 7,000. There's 2 million people live in the state. So when you look at that number, it's absolutely staggering. Less than 3,000 houses. The rest of them are apartments and blocks of land.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal. And then when we look at the rental market, I think it's like 1,800, 1,900 houses for rent. Yeah. In a state where 2 million people live, and it's just absolutely phenomenal that we've ended up in the position that we've ended up in.
Yeah, and again, it is impacting a lot of people. Yeah. And I agree with you in terms of the people that are living in the 3-4 bedroom houses on their own.
Got all these empty bedrooms. I think there's 12 million empty bedrooms across the country.
Yes, yeah. And interestingly, in a society where loneliness and social disconnection is becoming a real pandemic. I think
we wonder why.
Yeah, there was a recent study released by Curtin and Bankwest's research. I think it was a couple of years ago now, and it focused on WA, but it incorporated national.
I think I read that.
It was phenomenal. Yeah. And you're looking at that going, well, surely there's some, in terms of if you enable housing mobility, you free up larger homes, people move in, and you can put people in shared homes. Yeah, and there's just lots that we could be doing without wrapping around loads of policy issues, which also prevent financial investment as well.
It ties back into the start of the podcast when you said, you would help out there working with people, building community, seeing community. We've lost that sense of community, haven't we? Because we're all building these big houses that are disconnected from each other. No one plays in the street anymore. No, we're living on our own. We're going to a job that it's stressful. It takes us a while to get there because we've got so much urban sprawl. We're working in the city, but it takes us 40, 50 minutes to get there because we live so far away. Yeah, we get back in, we switch telly on, we sit there on social media. We're feeling lonely, we're feeling anxious. Absolutely. Just this vicious circle that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the challenge, we spoke earlier about younger people and their views on housing, the challenge is that it's younger people that are becoming more and more affected by that level of loneliness and disconnection. Yep. They've grown up in a world where that level of disconnection, bred by technology over connection, is normal. And so there's a level of mental health. There's a level of mental health well-being that's too low for us to accept, and there's a level of housing affordability that's too low for us to accept. And so you're starting to then look at a younger generation of people and think, well, for our kids, and I'm only 36, so it feels really strange to be saying this, but I look at younger people now that are 20 to 25, and I think you're going to be at home until you're 35, 40, unless you've got a level of wealth in your family. You don't feel great about the world, you feel disconnected, you feel lonely, and you can't find a place to live on your own. That gives you a sense of identity, belonging, purpose, to escape who you used to be, because everybody knows you grow up in a house, and then after a certain age, you go, this isn't for me. 9 out of 10 things we do as a family is amazing, but this one thing really winds me up. I want to live my life slightly differently. If you can't move out and get your own sense of identity, and you're feeling rubbish about the world, we'll end up with a very, very frustrated, angry society, really.
Yeah, true. Yeah, wow. Mate, let's get back onto Homehub, because, you know, like you say, you want to be the affordable housing marketplace for affordable housing. How many houses have you got on Homehub right now, and how many people are actually there waiting for housing?
Yeah, good question. So the level of need far outweighs the supply, which is the first thing.
By what percentage would you say?
Percentage is massive. But over the last, what we basically done when we first launched Homehub is we thought we'd just have a listings platform, and that we would try and encourage people to list. At the moment, we've probably got about 35, 40 listings on the Homehub website. They're largely for people with niche housing needs, so they're low to moderate income. So we've got a couple of NRAS, but mostly it's disability housing for people with disability, again in shared housing and shared service models.
NDIS or independent living?
Some of it is NDIS, well the majority is NDIS. There's a few SDA, but the majority of it is supported independent living. So it's people living in a group home with a vacancy, and so people are looking for a housemate, much like the HMO, but for people with disability. And then we also, and it came around at a certain time, so for about 18 months ago, we started to collect the level of housing need people coming through our website, because we were noticing we were probably getting about 3,500 hits on the website, like users. So it's not just a person coming on it, same person 3,500 times. It's 3,500 different users per month. And so we were thinking, well, let's start to try and collect some information to evidence what the level of need is, so we can start thinking about what the solutions might look like. So we launched what was called the Affordable Housing Needs Register. We've had just over 3,000 families, almost just shy of 4,000 households. And that consists of well over 9,000 people in those households. So you're looking at singles, couples, but also families of all different ages, all different family compositions, all different levels of housing need. So the reasons why they have housing, why they're registered for us. So although the conversion hasn't been huge from people coming to the website to people registering, I suspect it's because we've never marketed advertising Homehub as the solution. So a huge amount of people finding us just out of desperation. And because of that desperation, I think people don't want to register on a website that only has 40 listings. So the need for us is to generate the supply. That's really the challenge for us. That's the blockage in the system. What we do know, though, by doing what we've done, is that we know now how we can really help people. So based on the information that people have given us, we've tried to connect them to housing as and when it pops up over the last 18 months. But we now know what level of social welfare services people need access to, why people might not know what a financial counsellor does. If they've been in rentals for the last 20 years with a good rental history, they don't need a social and welfare service intervention, but they do need a financial counsellor to help them increase their household income to keep their property and their tenancy. So we know now what people need, so we're starting to move on to doing some of that work and automate the website a bit better. So the beta platform really was a test, and I think we've realised now there's lots of future potential in it. But the first thing is that we need to make sure we're helping all of the users that come to the website as much as possible. And then the second thing is we've housed people through that as well, which has been amazing. So we've housed over 150 people in that time as well. And we also now know what the affordable housing products and services should look like, or what we can do to design them. So because we've been collecting levels of housing need data for 18 months, we can actually say, well, here's what people look like in these areas. Here's real stories that we've collected. So we've got some quantitative data in terms of what's the average affordable rental that people can afford in an area. So it might be the North Metro, it might be Joondalup, might be Kalgoorlie, and might be the desert. So we've started to collect that data on affordability, number of households, number of people in those households, the age. So you can actually start to look at that and go, well, what does that look like from a quantitative perspective? What should we be building? Should we be building? Like what type of solutions in terms of HMO is one of those. If you've got thousands of single people earning a certain amount, well, there's your market need. Let's go and get investment for that. So we've been able to generate that level of market need data that's really, really critical to then help people who want to design and develop the solutions and invest in those solutions. They can do that confidently. And we're also hopefully going to be able to start influencing some of the policy makers as well. For us, it's a bit of a challenge at the moment because the state government is focused on social housing, but we do need some investment. Again, it goes back to that investment. We do need some investment in the affordable housing, because if we don't house these people, they are all still at risk of homelessness.
Yeah.
They are
default on social housing.
Yeah, or they're not eligible, so they default into homelessness.
Yeah.
So it's the minister now has both portfolios.
Yeah.
If you're not going to help them through social housing because they're over income, they're living in a tent on the beach in Margaret River. Yeah. So you need to help them through increased homelessness funding. I don't think we should be waiting till people hit rock bottom before we say, here's a range of things that might help you choose what's going to be best for you and your family, or best for you for the next 50 years to set yourself up for housing. So that's kind of where we've been as Homehub, and that's where we're going.
And based on the data that you've collected so far, is there a certain type of product that you see that is required in the marketplace more than anything else? Is it the standard 3x2 that your mum and dad developers are building out there? Is it the HMO? Is it a single bedroom dwelling? Is it an apartment? What is it, and what does it look like, and how much does it need to cost?
Yeah. Oh, Neil, it's such a good question. And you know what? No one's ever asked me that before, and I'd love to go, yes, and it looks like this. But actually, it's so varied. Yeah. It's so varied from person to place. I think as well, what makes it more complicated is the reasons why people need housing, and they're so complex. But also some of them are so simple. So you may be fleeing domestic violence, you may have a full-time job, you may have 2 kids, but you don't need any service, or you don't need any services. You just need the housing that's fit for purpose for you to then think about accessing services that you might need in the future. But it needs to be close to schools, it needs to be close to your work. And so actually when you look at it, you go, oh, we need to create all these social and welfare services for people. And absolutely, we need to make sure people have the supports that they need in life to thrive. But we need the housing first, which is the state government's strategy and policy direction. Housing first with support that's wrapped around them to maintain housing. So, yeah, to give you an example, we've got veterans, we've got men and women over 55. There's a huge growing population of women and men over 55, particularly women. It's the largest growing cohort of homelessness in Australia, which is a pretty sad indictment of our society. I think we should take care of 2 cohorts in particular, besides people that are vulnerable anyway, but it's our children, it's our elderly. And I think if there's a rate of older women over 55 becoming homeless that's increasing at a rate higher than anybody else who's homeless, that's a real sad indictment of our society. There's solutions out there that we can do, but again, it's, do you focus on a cohort? Do you focus on a solution that can help that cohort but other cohorts? So it's really varied. The level of housing need is so varied that what we would actually encourage anyone and everyone to do is think about, how do we co-design solutions where people get their social and their financial return on investment. So there's lots of opportunities for people to start businesses. There's lots of opportunities for people to invest in things like rent to buy. There's lots of people to do that from a non-profit perspective. There's lots of reasons why people would do it from a social enterprise perspective. You earn money out of those things and you deliver the outcome, the impact that people need as well. So there's lots of things that we can do, but it's not just a one size fits all, which makes that question so hard. Because I would love to go, here's the 5 things that we need to do, and we just scale those 5 and it helps everyone en masse. But it's actually quite complicated. And I think that's actually a challenge in our world, where everybody wants to just find a quick solution. And actually, I think it's a case of all working collectively to co-design lots of different solutions that benefit different people in different ways, and that benefits the consumers. And we just want to be a marketplace that connects those services and those solutions that have been designed and well informed by people's needs with the people that need them.
So I suppose the last question, or the biggest question I've got for you, is where do you feel like the HMO sits in that sort of marketplace? Do you see the need for it? Because we get a lot of people reach out to us and they say, who would want to live in these places? What sort of tenants do you attract? Is it transient? You know, all these questions, because people have a certain stigma around the style of accommodation that we provide, because they tend to generalise it with student accommodation. And that's kind of the only way they can kind of think about it. So where do you think it sort of fits in that housing continuum?
It's a great question. So we've got, one of the things that we were doing on our affordable housing needs register, we were asking people of all different household types. So some with children, some on their own, some with couples. You know, why do you need housing? Where would you consider living? How much can you afford? Who's in your household? But we also asked them, would you consider shared living in a, you know, different types of arrangements, but primarily focused on the type of HMO model that you've created. And we had over 1,000 respondents say that either yes, they're interested in doing it, or yes, they're interested, but they would need more information. So there's a captured market there that is only a fraction of the real market that is there for HMO. And so from a Homehub perspective, I get really excited about HMO because I think there's a huge potential for us not just to develop housing that's affordable, but develop housing that's affordable for HMO to use as a service model to achieve the outcomes that I know people need. So Homehub is almost, for me, that's exciting in the sense that, you know, that's Homehub kind of in action. Like, we're seeing that that's the value of it. We're not out there delivering the housing or delivering the services that results in the housing being successful. Really what we're saying is we know that the need's massive. Let's connect that market and the data with the people like yourself who are bright, who are motivated, who are compassionate to deliver what is not just a great thing for people who need housing. Impact's amazing, but it also returns a great level of financial investment for people to invest in this. So the opportunity is there to really scale HMO in WA and house thousands of people. Again, we need that level of investment, and we need it in HMO, but we need it in other services and solutions as well.
Definitely. There's something that you touched on, mate, and we are running out of time because we have got a meeting to get to after this. Because my business partner's in, my wife's coming, everyone wants to chat with you and see how we can make this work. So you touched on NDIS and supported independent living as well. Can we come on and just record another podcast based on them two subjects, because that's another big marketplace where there's huge need and marketplace for investors to provide accommodation for people that are in dire need of suitable accommodation to suit their disability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love that. And I think that one of the really interesting things at the moment with disability housing is there's different cohorts within the disability housing industry that will be serviced. So 6% of people are eligible for SDA, specialist disability accommodation. Huge market, huge rate of return, but it has to be done well. There's lots of risk in that. So engaging those investors with people like yourself are important. But there's also the need for the 94% who may not be eligible for the really high level of funding for specialist disability accommodation, but they also need access to housing services and products. That's within the NDIS. The people that aren't eligible for NDIS or don't want to apply for NDIS, but they may still have some form of disability. And this is also factored into mental health as well. So things like ADHD, all of those things, people might not consider that their disability is a reason for them to seek specialist services, but 1 in 5 people in Australia have a disability. And we can support those people with NDIS funding. There's huge funding there for that. But we see a lot of people come through Homehub who aren't necessarily eligible for NDIS, but they are part of that 1 in 5 people in Australia. And again, when I think about things like digital accessibility, huge amounts of websites just aren't accessible. And so you lose the commercial benefits of people coming through that website. Yeah,
especially if it's a government website.
Exactly.
Oh my God, the NDIS website is a minefield.
It's awful. Yeah. And then as a housing system, are we providing accessibility, not just to accessible housing, because there's a lack of accessible housing, but are we providing accessible opportunities for people to navigate I'm a person with a disability. What does my housing pathway or future look like? And then what options are there for me to access affordable housing?
Iain, yeah, it's been a pleasure. Like, we chatted for probably 35, 40 minutes before we hit record, and then we've hit record and we're already planning the next podcast. So really appreciate your time coming on the podcast, mate. Like I say, you are an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to this stuff, mate. And every conversation I have with you, I learn something new.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I just love coming and having a yarn with you.
You're very welcome, mate. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you stay up to date with all the cash flow positive property updates.